So, you want to learn how to play Graves like an Eternus player, eh? Well, you're in the right place. Today, I'm going to go over every single tip and trick that I use in order to play Graves effectively at an Eternus level. This video will be primarily on minion Graves, as it's my area of expertise, and also I think it's just simply the most optimized way to play her, and I'll be including a build guide as well as a bunch of tips for every single one of her abilities. Before we begin, let's briefly recap what each of her abilities do and all of the unique quirks that they have. Now, if you want to skip this section, go to this timestamp right here on the screen. But with that being said, let's get started by first taking a look at her gun and her base stats. She has a very short-range auto-aim weapon that also has very low DPS. She does leech more damage from the enemies with Essence Theft, which allows her to steal weapon damage and spirit resist, and the weapon damage will scale with spirit, and you can actually get quite a lot from this if you ramp it up. But even with the weapon damage ramping, she's still overall just has kind of a weak gun. It's more so used to apply debuffs, like Essence Theft in the first place, and also to target her minions around. And of course, she is rather squishy, and she only has 2 stamina bars, as well as one of the weakest movement speed stats in the game, so you're going to want to buy at least 1 or 2 movement items on her to make her feel better. This is definitely her biggest weak point. Her deadheads can be deployed at a great distance to attack the enemies violently, however they do have a relatively short targeting range, and so you'll want to use your weapon to signal which target they should attack. They do pretty consistent damage over time, but they can be destroyed by the enemies in just 1 punch, and most enemies can shoot them down in just 1 bullet as well, especially by the mid to late game. Furthermore, if you happen to be unlucky enough to be playing against someone with Ricochet, then yeah, say bye-bye to your minions. They aren't lasting long. The Jar of Dead is also a charged ability. You have 4 charges by default, and you build up the charges by picking up death. So if something dies near you, then it'll slowly accumulate charges of the Jar of Dead. So you'll want to constantly be picking up minion waves, clearing out camps, and doing whatever you can to ensure that you have as many charges as possible. But the Jar of Dead does come with a lot of perks. First of all, the Tier 1 upgrade gives you 5 health per death pickup, which is amazing for your self-sustain. This is usually going to be your biggest source of healing throughout any match. And then the Tier 2 allows you to slow the enemies, and the Tier 3 will allow you to get a huge bonus to the amount of deadheads that you deploy, and they will also trigger Essence Theft, which is very useful as another damage increase, because remember that Essence Theft lowers the enemy spirit resist and then gives it to you. Her second ability is a trap that will immobilize the enemies after a short arming period if they step into it, and this can be repeatedly triggered for the duration of the wall. And most people don't usually tend to upgrade this ability very much in their minion builds, just because the minions take priority, but that doesn't mean that the upgrades aren't good. It really just boosts the overall efficacy of the wall. You're able to root them for longer, you're able to have the wall deployed for longer, and the third upgrade lets you spam it more consistently and also just makes it really big, although, to be honest, this much range is overkill most of the time. And her ultimate is fantastic. You can deploy a tombstone that will repeatedly summon ghouls over 16 seconds, and the duration can be increased with spirit power. These guys explode on enemies for 150 damage and take a reasonable amount of damage to destroy, and they are mainly used for putting a lot of pressure on the lane as well as disrupting the enemies in a big team fight. On their own, they are very easy for the enemies to deal with. They can just stand at a distance and shoot them, so this is usually most effective when you're already in a hectic team fight and the enemies can't pay attention to all your minions. Now, the tombstone itself can be destroyed with 2 heavy melees, and notably, they can also be destroyed by abilities that do heavy melee damage. Most notably, Viscus's Puddle Punch is a super hard counter to this, especially because even if you, the Graves player, parry the Puddle Punch, it'll still hit your tombstone, so yeah, try to avoid playing Graves against Viscus if you can. But of course, the tombstone can, as a result, be used for parry baiting if you're up against aggressive enemies who try to destroy your tombstone, but a safer strategy is to try and put it somewhere where the enemies can't reach it easily, so that way you have a guaranteed flow of minions. Usually this involves placing it somewhere on the high ground, so the minions can spawn up here and then drop below, or just spawn on the low ground and then attack the enemies from there, or you can just place it behind a wall somewhere reasonably far away from the fight and have the minions just mosey on over. The downside of using this safely, of course, is that, well, it'll take longer for the minions to actually do anything. Borrowed Decree also has a bunch of upgrades that just make it really strong and have a ton of uptime. The first upgrade shaves 20 seconds off the cooldown, and then the second upgrade gives you 10 seconds of extra duration, and also makes the ghouls faster, so you can afford to actually put the tombstone farther away from the fight if you so choose, and it just makes the ghouls harder to avoid. And then the tier 3 upgrade is just the biggest DPS increase of all time. Instead of spawning 1 ghoul on cast, it spawns 3. And they also make the explosions do 5% current health damage. This is just so strong, and it's the reason why I'm going to max out Borrowed Decree first in my build. So now let's discuss the build. This is my Raging Swarm build, and is focused on swarming the enemies with as many minions as possible. Clues in the name. This build uses a number of tricks and synergies to make the Jar of Dead and Borrowed Decree as strong as physically possible. First of all, let's discuss the early game. So Restorative Shot is a phenomenal item on Graves because she literally can't miss it. Let me half health myself here, and if I just start spamming weapon shots that aren't hitting the enemies, it does not go on cooldown. But then as soon as I latch to an enemy, it automatically uses the restorative shot. So as long as you're able to constantly hit the enemies with this throughout the lane, you will get more healing from this item than any other early game sustain item. And the same is also true for an item like Mystic Shot, if you wanted to use that for any of your Graves builds, but of course this build doesn't have it. After that we get our Purple Spike straight away. Rapid Recharge is a phenomenal item on Graves because it gives her faster time between charges, as well as just more charges and more uptime on the deadheads across the board. Cooldown reduction does actually help you build up the Jars of Dead faster, and the cooldown reduction from Rapid Recharge is really all you need to have an incredible economy on these things, in tandem with Recharging Rush, which is the next item in the build here, that allows you to get an extra charge of your charged abilities when you deal significant weapon damage. I have tested Graves with just Rapid Recharge and not Recharging Rush, and I found that I was actually running out of Jars of Dead in teamfights, so both of these items are mandatory to ensure that you always have a Jar of Dead when you need it. And then of course Improved Spirit just gets us a bunch of spirit power, which makes our Jar of Dead and Borrowed Decree do way more damage. Now, when you actually decide to buy Recharging Rush and Heroic Aura to get your gun spike is variable and depends on the match, because for some matches you will want your green spike first. So let's talk about what I did for the green spike and why I did it. Enduring Speed solves her movement issue by giving her much more movement speed. This really just helps for overall map traversal and getting around the map without costing too much money. The other main option would be Stamina Mastery, which is very good and some Graves players buy it, but I just think that the cheaper option is more effective here because we also want Spirit Lifesteal and Healbane guaranteed. Healbane just makes sense, it's a spirit build, anti-heal is super important in Deadlock, and then Spirit Lifesteal allows us to get a little bit of extra sustain in a fight. Now as for Heroic Aura getting us to our gun spike, this is actually another fantastic DPS increase that multiplies the amount of damage the Jar of Dead is able to do. So if I throw a Jar of Dead down and then use Heroic Aura, you'll notice that, yeah, they get this blue effect, they become empowered, and now they are attacking significantly faster. This is a massive damage multiplier. This is stupendously strong. There really is no reason not to get this on a minion build, especially because it also provides that movement speed boost to your minions from Borrowed Decree, so you can amplify them and then they just charge the enemies so fast. It is really hard to avoid that, especially when you stack it with the tier 2 upgrade from Borrowed Decree. So this is just a monstrous upgrade, and the fact that it naturally gets us to our gun spike with Recharging Rush is really just a bonus, a cherry on top, because, I mean, even with the gun spike, she's still not doing that much gun damage. After we get this first row of items online, we move on to the mid game, where we get a couple of items that empower our ultimate before getting Echo Shard, which is the biggest power spike of the entire build. So Arcane Surge and Compressed Cooldown are both for the ultimate, and some people will just have Duration Extender instead of Arcane Surge, which is absolutely fair enough. Arcane Surge does give a little bit less ability duration, but it also gives us some spirit power and range, while also helping to solve our movement issue. This, in tandem with Enduring Speed, is usually enough to make you reasonably fast. It's enough to cover your weaknesses. And the reason I don't also get Duration Extender is because we're really slot locked at this point in the build. You can sell Restorative Shot if you need, but after that we need Echo Shard, and then we need Boundless Spirit and Escalating Exposure, and depending on the match, you might not have the slots for all that. But anyways, let's discuss Echo Shard now. This is just such a broken item on Graves because it allows her to double up on her minions. And it also gives her the full charge back, so you're not even losing out on any minion economy here by using this item. And let me just show you the damage real quick. Heroic Aura them all, and I mean, yeah, look at all that damage. This is insanely broken, and it also makes her more consistent in a way that's better than just increasing the raw damage of each of the minions from the Jar of Dead, because it makes it harder for the enemies to destroy all your minions. It's easier to just punch or shoot 6 minions than it is for 12 minions. It's just overwhelming, and you're guaranteed to get a lot of damage on the enemies before they finally take out your minions. Once you get Echo Shard online, that's really when you can start to get super active as Graves. Before that, your role is really just to be a macro queen and a defender of your guardians and walkers. She's a really good defensive character, but once she gets the Echo Shard, she can start to jump on someone, throw all these minions at them, and just watch them explode. And it's even better if you're able to trap the enemies in the process, because the trap will disorient them and kind of just make them freak out, and they won't be able to deal with your minions as easily. And then after that, we really just focus on giving the minions as much damage as possible. Boundless Spirit is just phenomenal on this character because it adds a whole load of extra damage to the Jar of Dead and Borrowed Decree, but it also increases the duration of Borrowed Decree, so you get even more minions. And then Escalating Exposure works really well on her too. Gives her some more spirit resist, lowers the enemy's spirit resist, and also that spirit amp will be able to stack up super consistently because the minions deal damage over time. If I Echo Shard this, Heroic Aura, they're just going to be constantly tickling this enemy and building up the Escalating Exposure stacks on him. And then if a Borrowed Decree minion were to come in with a bunch of stacks, look at the damage. That's almost 3k! Just from these guys! What do you mean? That's insane! And then the rest of the upgrades really just speak for themselves. Spirit Burn is great for anti-heal and damage. Focus Lens allows you to do something very funny and multiply your damage even further, while reducing enemy spirit resist and just absolutely shredding them. It's a great item if you have the luxury of being able to afford it. Infuser for extra healing, Lightning Scroll for funnies with your ultimate, Superior Duration just scales really well on this character, trans cooldown as well. Refresher is also a really funny item on Graves. There is a very special combo you can do with your ultimate and your Jar of Dead, where you throw out the Echo Shard and all this, then you borrow Decree, Refresher, that gives you back all your charges, and then you have 18 skulls, 6 ghouls all in one burst with plenty more ghouls on the way. And if you Heroic Aura all of that, I mean, you are able to just nuke a team fight. The only reason it's not baked into the actual build order is because Refresher itself is very inconsistent. You blow your entire load of minions in one team fight, and then you usually don't get to use Refresher for most of the other fights in the game, and at that point it is just dead weight on your character. It doesn't help you overall just with your consistency in those smaller fights and in those other team fights where Refresher is down. So it's a fun item, but usually not worth a pickup. Finally, let's address the ability point order. So, in the early game, I put my first point into the Jar of Dead because this health is so impactful. It really makes her a tough character to kill on lane because of all the extra healing that she gets. And then after that, we of course get our Essence Theft, and we put 1 point into that for the Max Spirit Resist Stolen, because, well, it makes everything do more damage, and it makes us tankier. Then after that, we are just rushing the ultimate. From my testing and looking at the damage graphs in most of my games, it seems that Borrowed Decree is the stronger ability to prioritize, and it ends up doing the most damage for us. So that's why we maxed it out, especially because this tier 3 is a major power spike, and it makes her so strong in team fights, especially before we're able to get Echo Shard online. You can just pop this down and let the ghouls do the work for you. And then after that, of course, we are maxing out the Jar of Dead immediately after, since it is our second biggest source of damage, and we get the +2 deadheads around the time we get Echo Shards. So yeah, that just works out really nicely, and I mean, yeah, this is just disgusting. After that, I put 1 more point into Essence Theft to steal more of the enemy's weapon damage, just so I'm able to become tankier. I'm not really the one doing much weapon damage, but if I can steal their weapon damage, then they're less likely to kill me. And then finally, we just max out the Grasping Hands. I don't go for the weapon attaching to an additional target until the very, very end of the build, and that's because it is inconsistent. The targeting circle on this is really small. Like, you can see even here, I'm not able to latch to this second guy without, like, some extremely precise aiming. And also, you know, because Graves is so short-ranged, it's gonna be rare that you actually have 2 enemies on your screen like this. It's a cool concept, and it is very powerful when it works, but it's just not the best upgrade to go for, especially not on a build like this, when your Jar of Dead is already applying Essence Theft for you. One more thing to discuss about the build before we get into the gameplay tips are these two counterplay features up here. Rebuttal is amazing on Graves because her Tombstone is such a massive parry bait. The enemies will try to heavy melee you, and they will also try to bait out your own parry and just miss, so then they can destroy your Tombstone for free. Rebuttal allows you to deal a bunch more damage to the enemies when you do parry them, and when you miss your parry, it gives you the cooldown back faster, so by the time they swing their second shot at your Tombstone, you are able to parry them. So this is a phenomenal item, especially if you're up against enemies that already do a lot of melee damage like Abrams or Billy. And then Disarming Hex, I honestly don't find myself buying this very often, but in theory it is a good item if you're up against a lot of gun builds because it disarms them, which means that obviously you're gonna survive, but also your minions are more likely to survive because they won't be able to shoot them down. They will just have to melee them, and meleeing them is significantly harder to do without letting the minions at least get one hit on you. So in theory it's a good item. In practice, most of the time I still don't pick it up. Real quick before moving on, if you've been enjoying this video and you found it to be helpful so far, then make sure to subscribe down below so you don't miss out on future videos from me. And while you're down there, make sure to like this video as well, so that way YouTube knows to promote this video in the algorithm and show it to more people. But with that being said, let's get back to the video. But now let's talk about some gameplay tips. Graves is a very unique character because she is more focused on positioning than most of the rest of the cast, and she is also very vulnerable, as we spoke about earlier. She only has 2 stamina bars by default, she's really slow, and she's rather squishy as well, so you're going to want to position yourself safely, especially before you have your big power spikes online. Once you have your Echo Shard and your Borrowed Decree maxed out and your Jar of Dead maxed out, you can get a lot more aggressive on this character, because by that point in the game, you have more mobility, you usually have a counterplay item in the form of something like Counterspell, and you're going to do a ton of damage. But in the early game, you're going to need to be way more careful with your positioning, especially if you're against characters who have hard CC, like Abrams and his charge, or characters that are faster than you, like Lash or Celeste. If you're too aggressive against those characters, then, well, Abrams is just going to shoulder charge you into a wall, he's going to stun you, do a lot of damage, and you probably won't be able to escape because you're slower than him. And also, if you're too aggressive against someone like Lash or Celeste, and you end up taking a lot of damage, you will not be able to run away because they are so much faster than you. So you need to play defensively and try to make the enemies come to you. The closer they are to you and your objectives, the stronger you become, because the more likely your minions are to do damage. And then, if they are close to you, like let's say about here, coming up and approaching your Walker or your Guardian, that's when you can try to trap them. Play a little more aggressive, put a wall behind them, and have them run back into the wall and become trapped, and at that point, it's usually an easy kill. So now let's talk a little bit about how you should use the Jar of Dead. This can be a very difficult ability to use consistently, especially the higher up in rank you go, because the more cognizant people are of the need to destroy these minions as soon as they spawn. The best time to use the Jar of Dead is actually very similar to the best time to use a Puddle Punch from Viscous. That skill set kind of transferred over to me, because you only want to Puddle Punch people when they're distracted on something else, and the same is true for the Jar of Dead. If you're on lane with an enemy and they're looking at you, trying to attack you, and then you throw a Jar of Dead right in front of them like this, they're going to see it coming, and they're going to shoot or punch the minions almost immediately. It's just not a very good strategy. And also, if you're playing from far away and you just chuck some minions into Narnia, it's going to be harder to position them properly. Some of the minions will just kind of fly away, as you can see there. So not all the minions will be attacking, and once again, it'll be very easy for the enemies to deal with them. So what you need to do is try to time your minions for when they're distracted on something else. Do you see this Infernus going after a friendly, secondary Infernus over here? Well, then that's the perfect time to throw the minions behind him, latch onto him with your weapon, and have the minions attack, because while he's distracted on this other person, he'll respond to your skulls slower, and he won't be able to kill all of them before they get 1 or 2 hits on him. Furthermore, if you deploy your minions behind the enemies like this, then even if they know the minions are coming, they're still going to have to turn around to shoot them or melee them, which will take some pressure off of you and usually guarantee one hit on the enemies. Also, you need to be careful about your target prioritization with your in-hand weapon when you're fighting with the minions on the lane and there are a bunch of troopers around. You might want to instinctively just shoot a trooper in order to destroy it, get some souls, get it away from you, blah-de-blah, but your minions, especially when they're close to you like this, will target whatever you shoot. So let's pretend that this Rem is a trooper on the lane, and then Eternus is just a player that's attacking me. If I want my Jar of Dead to attack Eternus, but then I pop behind cover and shoot the trooper, all of my skulls are going to then attack the trooper, because they target whatever I'm shooting at if they are close enough to me. So you need to be very considerate of your target prioritization, and sometimes not shooting the trooper is the best call because it'll leave your Jar of Dead on the actual enemy player. And if your skulls need a little bit of help, then of course make sure to actually shoot the enemy that you want them to go to. This is why I generally recommend not throwing the Jars of Dead just into Narnia over here, because even if they do start attacking some enemies, it's not always going to be guaranteed that they hit the correct enemy, and sometimes they just might target onto a trooper instead, and you won't be able to tell them the correct target to attack. So the closer you are, the better. Next, let's talk about how to use her wall properly. This is one of the most effective crowd control tools in the game if you know how to set it up properly. Of course, the wall has a very long arming time to it. You deploy it, and then a second later, it's finally able to root the enemies, which makes it an ability that you can't really use reactively. If the enemy is already running away, then actually hitting them with the wall is going to be very difficult. There are some cases where you can use the alt cast and deploy it vertically like this to get some extra range and cut the enemies off. This is very difficult to do, but sometimes it can work. But really, you want to employ better planning skills than that by deploying the wall before the enemies actually start to run away. So what you can do is engage with the enemies, deploy the wall behind them, and then play more aggressively to try and get them to go into your wall. This is even better if you're able to place it at a choke point like this bridge here, because then they will either be forced to go through the bridge like this and get rooted, or they will have to realize that the wall is there and then try to path around it differently, and you can use that pathing to mess them up. Trying to wall jump onto the bridge and then vault over it like this is way slower than just going under the bridge, and it gives you more time to shoot at them. And you can actually exploit the positioning of the wall even more to block off a huge portion of the map. Take this choke point right here, for example, this ramp. You have cover here and you have cover here, leaving just this tiny gap where you can actually walk through. And so if I just deploy the wall normally like this, then, sure, I'll block off the ramp and a little bit of this side area too. But we can cover so much more ground than that. If I deploy the wall vertically like this, then all of a sudden, going through here is going to be very tricky. You're going to have to, skirt around the side of the wall, and there's a little bit of magnetism to it, so the chances of getting rooted are pretty high. But then we also end up extending the wall way further beyond. It goes down the entire ramp, it goes a little bit back here, and if I deploy it farther down like this, then all of a sudden, this entire ramp is blocked off, and it goes all the way out to here, just causing way more disruption. I use this trick sometimes when I'm sieging an objective or something like this. I will just rotate the wall and deploy it kind of like this to cause some disruption. It'll come all the way over to me, so if the enemies want to get up close and personal, I can just bounce around the wall like this. And also, if they're hiding back by their guardian, they'll also have to consider their positioning carefully. Furthermore, it is imperative that you combo the wall with other crowd control abilities to secure a kill on the team. So, for example, if we have a Lash here who wants to ult the enemies onto the Guardian. Yeah, that's pretty good. And then what we can do is take control of Graves, and we can throw the root down where those guys are about to be thrown. Obviously, that was really, really slow, but ideally, you would deploy this as soon as you see Lash's little blue circle appear on the ground. And that way, as soon as they land, they will get rooted. And you can do this with so many other crowd control abilities, whether it's rooting someone who's already rooted by Paige's ult, or rooting someone who just got shoulder charged by Abrams, or rooting someone as soon as they come out of the Baroness. There are a million ways that you can combo this wall together to absolutely destroy the enemies. But what about if you're being chased by the enemies and you need to retreat and stop the enemies in their tracks? Well, deploying the wall like this and then backpedaling battling is not a good way to do it, because the enemies will often just run over the wall before it's had the time to arm. Instead, what you want to do is deploy it in the direction that you're retreating. So let's say Rem is chasing me, and I want to go back through this veil. What I will do is I will run, deploy the wall here, and then jump past the wall like this. That way, if the Rem wants to chase me, he is going to get trapped by this wall, or he'll have to adjust accordingly by hearing the wall deploy, and then double jumping over it, or taking some slower, longer path to continue chasing me. It's a much more effective way to use this tool. Using the trap effectively really just comes down to having good pre-planning and positioning skills, and if you can master that using the tips I've just given you, then you will have a great time using this to make the enemies very miserable. Now, there's not much to say about her weapon. It's not like it takes skill to use. It's an auto-aim weapon. It has short range. You'll want to position yourself smartly to try and keep yourself in the effective range of your weapon without taking too much damage, and that involves skills that we've already talked about in this video. But there are a few unique quirks about her weapon that some people still like to exploit. For example, Ricochet is fantastic on this character for a number of reasons. First of all, it just allows you to leech from multiple enemies at a time, which is very nice. And also, you can have a double Ricochet with the Tier 3 Essence Theft. So if your weapon is attaching to two targets like this, both targets will ricochet to each other, and this will drastically amplify your damage. Furthermore, because her weapon is so consistent, it is great at applying other debuffs like Toxic Bullets and Inhibitor, which is a combo that you'll see in a lot of other very popular Graves builds that place more of an emphasis on her gun. Personally, I just don't think building for her gun is worth it. I've done a lot of testing, and it just feels like an inferior playstyle to pure minion Graves. It doesn't do as much damage, and it's just less consistent if you know how to use the minions properly. But I figured I'd mention these tips anyways. Finally, let's talk about her ultimate, and this is her bread and butter for being a macro goddess. She is able to be pretty much in two places at once with the Borrowed Decree, because what you can do is you can throw the Tombstone on a lane to help out one of your allies who is pushing or defending or anything like that. And then you can rotate on over to another lane and start to push that out, or go and farm, or go and do anything that you need to do. So I'm over here on blue, and my Tombstone is still doing stuff on yellow. It just got me another kill, and another kill. Hey, sorry, Eternus and Rem. But yeah, I'm just chilling over here at blue lane. I could be thwarting some minions. I could be taking jungle camps or sinners sacrifices. And so you want to use this pretty consistently to just apply good, consistent pressure to a lane while you're doing other objectives. Or you can even use the Tombstone as a tool to farm. Tier 3 camps are pretty difficult to take down, but the Tombstone will help you out greatly with this, because your minions will just start melee attacking these troopers here, and yeah, take it out with ease. And they also have enough duration that once this camp is done, they will swarm onto the lane and still put a lot of pressure on the enemies. The enemies will have to come deal with these, and also, as a nice added side effect, if someone tries to interrupt you while you're farming, then, I mean, you've got like 4, 5, 6 minions here that will all instantly target the enemy, explode on them, and usually kill them. But her ultimate isn't just useful for macro, it's also phenomenal in fights. If you want to attack an objective, like the Guardian or the Walker, obviously, you'll want to have some help from your Tombstone, but where you place it depends on the strategy that you want to employ and what makes sense for the situation. I'm someone who likes to use it aggressively for parry baiting, so if I'm trying to siege this Guardian, I might put the Tombstone back here, which is really close to the enemies, and they might be encouraged to come over here and just try to punch this Tombstone just to relieve their Guardian of all this pressure. And that's where you can camp around your Guardian and get ready to parry. And you can still play up here by the Guardian, but if you see an enemy trying to dive back here, you can quickly zip on over to your Tombstone and try to parry them. Now, even when you are aggressively parry baiting, you still want your Tombstone to be reasonably well protected, just so you also have some cover. So this is another aggressive Tombstone location. You have this cover to protect yourself from weapon shots and abilities coming in this direction, but it's still out in the open enough that the enemies might be tempted to come over here and just give this thing a whack. It's a very fun strategy to employ, and if you're really good at parrying, then it can be highly effective. But it is also risky, and many Graves players will want to use a safer placement strategy. Now, placing the tombstone safely requires the right balance of putting it just out of the way enough that it's hard for the enemies to reach, without placing it so far away that your ghouls are ineffective, because the farther away from the fight you place it, the longer your ghouls are going to have to walk over to deal with the enemies, and the more time the enemies will have to just shoot your ghouls to death. A common tactic is to place the tombstone on a high ground somewhere, and the ghouls will spawn up here and just drop on down and then march on up the lane. But placing it up here is a lot harder to get to than just having the tombstone on the ground right there in that more aggressive tombstone position. And if you really want to get creative, then you can even place the tombstone on a platform up there by just parkouring on up, and yeah, just chucking it there. And I mean, that is insanely hard to punch, unless you're playing someone like Celeste or Lash, who has a lot of vertical mobility. So that's basically a guaranteed way to have all your ghouls come out of the tombstone. But if I don't want to place it on the high ground, either because I don't have time or I'm not skilled enough to get up there, then I can still place the tombstone in a reasonably safe position. If I'm sieging this walker and most of the fight is going to be happening up here and back here, then I could just place the tombstone over here, or in this room right here. This is really out of the way and very far from where the main arena is, but my ghouls will still have plenty of time to waddle on up here and do some damage to the walker even. So once again, placing the tombstone requires good pre-planning and understanding of what the enemies are going to do. Are you skilled enough to parry them consistently when you place the tombstone? If so, you might want to try a more aggressive position. If not, then, well, try and place it somewhere safer and get creative with your map knowledge to find some spots that the enemies will have a very difficult time accessing. And even if you are someone who is good at parrying and placing the tombstone aggressively, some situations still just don't call for it. If the enemies have a lot of crowd control that they can use to stun you and manipulate you while you're defending your tombstone, then using it aggressively is a no-go. But if it is just someone like Billy, who just wants to come in and mindlessly hit your tombstone, then yeah, aggressive placements are so much fun. But anyways, that's gonna do it for this video. So let me know what you think about Graves in the comment section down below. Did you find this video to be helpful? What tip was your favorite? And did I miss anything that could be useful to a budding Graves player? Let me know all of your thoughts in the comments section down below. And while you're down there, of course, make sure to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos from me. Also, I live stream every single day, Monday through Friday, right here on YouTube and also over on Twitch, so make sure you're following me for that. You won't want to miss out. You can come and ask me any questions you like, or just have a fun time. The streams are a great place to be. But with all that being said, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all next time. Peace out.